I see President Trump cozying up to Putin. What a disaster that is. He attacks his closest friends and neighbors, stood shoulder to shoulder with them in wars and other crises. And who does he cozy up to? But Putin. You got to be kidding me.
Today, the United States launched a trade war against Canada, their closest partner and ally, their closest friend. At the same time, they're talking about working positively with Russia, appeasing Vladimir Putin, a lying, murderous dictator. Make that make sense.
Make that make sense. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Ontario Premier Doug Ford trying to square the circle that is Donald Trump coming after this country, imposing punishing tariffs on Canada, tariffs that were initially billed as border security related, that are now being rebranded by the U.S. administration with a clear goal to move manufacturing to America. This country did hit back today with counter tariffs, and Doug Ford is threatening to cut off electricity exports. Take a listen.
I'm writing to every senator, every congressman and woman, and the governors from New York State, Michigan, and Minnesota, telling them that these tariffs persist. If the Trump administration follows through on any more tariffs, we will immediately apply a 25% surcharge on the electricity we export. We will not hesitate to shut off their power as well. I'm encouraging my fellow premiers to follow suit.
So where does this all go from here? Let's talk about that with our front bench. With me this evening, former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant. He's now the CEO of Space Canada. Former Conservative Deputy Leader Lisa Raitt is here. She's the Vice Chair and Managing Director of Global Investment Banking at CIBC. CTV News political analyst and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair is with us. And so is the Toronto Star's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Rob Benzie. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you. Rob, I'll start with you because Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary for Donald Trump, was just on Fox, like all of a sudden saying there's an announcement coming tomorrow and that there'll be a meeting in the middle and perhaps a rollback. Like those are all terms that were used. How do we figure out whether to put any stock into that? And what do you make of how we respond kind of in the interim?
What, Vashi, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure what Secretary Lutnick said is sincere, and he is probably hoping that that's the case. But I actually think what Minister Joly said to you earlier in the show was actually more logical, is that no one knows for sure what Trump is going to do. We're basically all on tenterhooks because of a 78-year-old toddler who has a tantrum here every now and again. And it's not good for the economy of the United States. It's not good for our economy. This is going to be a very bad time for the next little while. But I thought that Premier Doug Ford and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau were at their best today in a way because they were communicating logic and reason. The problem is their audience, the audience of one at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., are they listening? Is that audience of one listening? I don't know.
The Prime Minister at one point, and I thought most notably in all his remarks, Brian, talked about what he believed to be the true motivation here, that Donald Trump wants to crush the Canadian economy in order to be able to later on, annex this country. Obviously, there have been some comments from the president as well as his delegates to the effect of particularly wanting to move the auto sector to the United States, and those comments have come very recently. How, I guess, stark a message do you think that is, and how will that inform how Canadians kind of respond or support the response or maybe not going forward?
Yeah, on annexation, they'd be up for a fight, that's for sure. I mean, I think we should take it seriously. I don't think we should make moves based on that, but take it seriously nevertheless. And what we can 100% conclude is that he is trying to bully us repeatedly. He's mocking us. And but it's not only us. Obviously, Mexico as well. There's been no comments of annexing Mexico, and they're sort of getting the same treatment. So that also leads me to believe that take it seriously, yes, but don't make decisions based on that. The challenge that I see is the following. The economic repercussions, everybody's talking about it. They're terrible for Canada, terrible for the U.S., and the U.S. is doing it with many countries, so it's going to be a few times over with their trading relationships. But so I'll park that aside for a sec. Obviously terrible. People are talking about that. What I'm incredibly worried about as well is the idea that this guy who's in charge of the most important country in the history of humankind doesn't seem to understand the role and responsibilities. He doesn't seem to understand that these economic ties with trading partners, with allies, help the U.S. have influence, very, very evident and direct influence, or at times soft influence. And by doing things like this, even if tomorrow it comes off or somewhat comes off, or in a month or in a year or whatever the case is, damage is done. And if we feel the way that we feel here in Canada, we're their best friends. We've been their best friends for so long. Imagine how other countries are going to feel if and when they go through something similar. I mean, they're just going to lose all credibility on the international stage at a time when a year ago I was already worried about the U.S.'s ability to be able to push back on some of the other blocs that are forming. Now, when they're weakening their allies and they're making their allies not trust them, I'm incredibly concerned about all of this moving forward.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be coming to a conclusion anytime soon, particularly when you look to their comments on Russia, the display in the Oval Office on Friday. Like there is a realignment taking place. You know, the degree to which it affects us obviously remains, I think, to be seen. Lisa, your thoughts on where things go from here, and in particular the discussion between premiers and the federal government about blocking things like oil and gas, electricity, putting extra taxes on them, potash. There are, you know, tonight, or today rather, I felt like every premier and the federal government sounded the same. They were on message and certainly unified. But the discussion behind the scenes, you know, could see some cleavages in that area. What do you think about how that unfolds?
Well, there are two different routes that have to be thought about. The first is one that we're talking about now, the retaliatory stuff, whether or not it's going to be a tariff or if it's going to be a surtax at the border. Provinces are going to make those decisions themselves, I think. I think it'd be very dangerous for a federal government to start imposing their thought on what a province should do. So what the meeting tomorrow should be is a consensus on where they can go and how far they can go and who's comfortable doing what and supporting one another in that path. The second road that has to be dealt with, which is important as well, is how do we make sure that Canada's economy is going to rev itself up and continue to grow over the next 4 years as we deal with President Trump, who may pull this stunt every 6 weeks. We're on, we're off, we're on, we're off. So I would say that at the same time as we're trying to deal with Trump, let's get a little real in that room as to what it is we have in Canada. What can we sell? What are we good at? Who do we have to do this work? Put a plan together and execute on it. And that's what I'll be looking for when I hear from whoever is going to be running in the next election.
I imagine, though, at all levels of government, the level of public consensus and support for doing what Lisa just laid out in the second half of her answer there, Tom, has never been higher. And like the responsibility they will bear is being able to capitalize on that and actually produce results, right? Because for the first time in a long time, most Canadians are on the same page, and they want us to become less reliant on the United States.
I think that that's the biggest change that's going to be wrought by this particular bout of Donald Trump. Because as Lisa correctly says, you're never sure where you stand, and it could change in 6 weeks. There was something that was absolutely poetic today, very good acting by both Justin Trudeau and Howard Lutnick. Trudeau's best line was when he looked at the camera and said, "Donald, you're a smart guy," but the Wall Street Journal says this is a really dumb move. When he said you're a smart guy, it was almost as if you could sense that he was smiling, knowing, here's the game that I have to play. I've got to give this guy a compliment, and nobody believes it because I'm smiling. Lutnick did the exact same thing a couple of hours ago on Fox News. He said, the president's a fair man, and he's going to announce that we're backing off from this. So it's the classic Trump. He's going to declare victory for himself and for his brilliant move on tariffs. But in the meantime, real companies in the real world are making real decisions that are going to affect things long term. I spoke for 1 hour today with a guy who has 3 branches, 3 factories in the United States, 3 in Canada. His Canadian supplier of one thing that gets used here and in the States is applying immediately the 25% for what goes to the States. He turned around and found another supplier in Italy where there are no tariffs. So that's going to mean that that company is going to get the client back. These types of real things are happening. This is the chaos of Donald Trump. And long term, what is being wrought is not going to disappear, even if he finally realizes the obvious, that the main target of his tariffs are American consumers. This is Donald Trump's tax on everything, including your pickup truck. That's finally starting to make it through, because the first people who increase based on the price change are the oil companies, and it's hitting Americans at the tank right away.